Hello traders, Cousin Vinny coming to you from theclosingprint.com, July 25th, 2021. In this edition of your weekend video newsletter, we'll discuss the indices, US moving higher last week. We did see the Southeast Asia countries, Japan and China a bit weak, along with the Bombay Stock Exchange, while ACWI and the Vanguard International Index moved higher. FANG stocks, growth stocks moved higher last week. Roku had a huge move on Friday. While high yield corporate and junk bonds moved higher, we have a lot of bullish signals in addition to the S&P Equal Weight Index. As we finished the week with breadth improving, tick and tick-Q showed that institutions were buying. Currencies and commodities moved higher last week, improving conditions there. And we had bonds fading a little bit on Friday, but in a ascending channel. Sectors are improving. International markets were consolidating. We'll look at some IBD 50 names that look set up, along with stocks from the relative strength scan at new highs in white and stocks on the move in green. We also ran some scans. Those are in white, and those stocks with a 950 crossover in green. Bukowski has 505 green with a CPI signal half green since the beginning of July at 100%. That's an extreme. With 0 bearish patterns this week, 31 bullish, and 323 patterns waiting for breakout. We have 11 bullish signals, 7 neutral, and 2 bearish. S&P support at 4330, resistance at 4400. Those are gamma levels. Building the OPEX range for August. 43.45 is the vol trigger, and Monday we're looking at a bit of caution to start the week. There could be some euphoria building the market as we saw VIX moving higher along with the markets last week. So we'll look for institutions to give us a signal starting off on Monday and Tuesday. The S&P Equal Weight Index is on a buy signal. We have both indicators, the A50R and CCI, rising, with over 67% of stocks consolidating over the last 3 months prior to that signal, while price action remained in a range. So that's good for the bulls. If we get above the top of this range and break out, we could expect to see a trend develop going into the end of the year. From a bearish perspective, obviously, we would look for resistance at highs. Growth versus value continued its trend higher, with growth outperforming well above the 21-day, getting a bit extended, so we could see a little bit of weakness going into some of the earnings that we're looking at this week, with many of those stocks in the core portfolios of institutions. We could see that XII did trade near the highs of the session, together with the S&P 1500 composite, S&P 500, 400 mid caps, and 600 small caps, remaining on a buy signal. Histogram is above zero line, and price action for these 1500 stocks are at highs in the upper Bollinger Band, with a big caveat in the small caps. If we did see a follow through and a push above the 50-day this week, that would be very helpful for a risk on signal, whereas a rejection and a move back down towards the 200-day signaling risk off as we trade near highs. So breadth is the one thing we'll be looking for improvement. We have the NYHL, New York Stock Exchange, high-low, still above the zero line, but producing lower highs as we trade near this resistance zone overhead. We'd also like to see the advanced decline in the middle panel produce a higher high with more advancing stocks than declining going into this week. If that were to happen, we would most likely see the S&P advanced decline percent, the mid-cap advanced decline, small caps, and NASDAQ advanced decline percent continue higher from an oversold condition just set on Monday, last week. So we could see a follow through for another week. That would potentially give us the breakout we're looking for in the previously mentioned charts. Bonds also give us reason to be more bullish equities, with the bond stock ratio moving lower, as we saw back in 2017 when this blue line, the 65 period moving average on the weekly, continued to drop as it is now, and the ratio dropped. That's told you that bonds were out of favor, equities were in favor. Together with signals from the Bank of America High Yield Index option adjusted spread, we're starting to see this moving higher. So that could be a sign that institutions are starting to position for equities to do just the opposite as we trade near highs. If this gets a bit wider and starts to trend higher like it did back in February of 2020 before COVID hit, that'd be a sign that institutions are starting to position a little bit more aggressively on the defensive side. So just keep an eye on this particular index, which you can find by typing in Bank of America yield spread, BOA yield spread, and just clicking on this top link. We can see that TLT remains in an upward channel. It's above the 200-day and all of the moving averages, sitting right on top of the 9 EMA. Looking for that to follow through. A little bit oversold, and we could see a bounce there. So look for a little bounce in TLT. These can rally at the same time that equities rally, as we saw back in 2017 and 2019, where we had both the S&P 500 in the top panel and TLT in the lower panel rallying at the same time. So the fact that S&P 500 is moving higher doesn't automatically give us a sell signal in the equity market, as we can clearly see with junk bonds. The high yield corporate and high yield junk bonds are all moving higher. That's telling you that traders do not have a fear of the markets breaking down just yet, like we saw back in February of 2020, as this produced a hanging man candle off of the 21 EMA last week, looking for a push above these volume by price bands, which will act as support in the short term. So one chart like the Bank of America yield spread isn't a reason to get bearish just yet, just something to keep an eye on going into the seasonally weaker months of the year, August and September. We also saw currencies with the US dollar outperforming, rising against most major world currencies, which is producing this bearish trend or downward or descending channel in the British pound US dollar pair, while the US dollar Japanese yen pair shows strength in the US dollar. This would be bullish for equities if this continues to break higher, with yet another bullish indicator for equities with copper gold ratio, copper outperforming. When we've seen that in the past, that led to the gains that we're looking at here on the chart, still pushing higher as the copper gold ratio continues higher, with copper breaking this descending pattern that we've seen for the last 2 months, starting to push higher. Tight Bollinger Bands, looking for a push with a correlated break higher in home builders and home improvement stocks like Home Depot and Lowe's, which we saw last week, as gold tries to produce a higher low this week and a higher high potentially, with RSI below 50, watching for copper to outperform gold, and for home improvement stocks, Home Depot and Lowe's, along with the builders, which are breaking back above the 50-day. And finally, keep an eye on Brent and West Texas crude. We did bounce last week on this weekly time frame. You can see this hanging man or hammer at the middle of the Bollinger Bands and Keltner channels pushing higher on higher volume. So with its positive correlation, you would expect to see equities improving as Brent continues higher. We would also be looking for gush to move higher with crude oil this week, produce a higher low potentially. We're looking for that higher high and a push back towards the 50-day this week. We would want to mention that one of our other bearish indicators is the XLY-XLP ratio, which has been showing a plateau or change of direction like we saw back in late 2018, about 3 or 4 weeks before the market started to turn. We saw this ratio turning as well, just like we saw back in 2020 when the markets moved lower. So we're watching how this ratio plays out. There's still time for this to turn back up, an indicator that we need to pay attention to if we're looking for a breakout. With that in mind, we did see strength in biotechs last week with IBB breaking higher. Real estate is at highs. Communications sector pushed higher thanks to Snap, Twitter, Facebook, and Roku. With technology continuing its path higher, industrials looked a little better. Consumer staples, as just previously mentioned, showing signs of defensive positioning, along with XLU and XLV healthcare. Consumer discretionary is breaking out. So with all of these sectors moving higher, it's going to be difficult for the XLY XLP ratio to be the only reason to get short or to get more defensive. We need to see these sectors breaking down as well, which we're not seeing as of yet. We do have weakness in energy and financials that needs to pick up a bit. So steady as she goes until we see a clear signal to get out of the markets or to position more bearishly. The NYSE shows that the month of August tends to be one of the weaker months of the year for the New York Stock Exchange, a broad measure of market participation, along with the Wilshire 5000, which is about 3,700 stocks at present, so it's a little misleading. The Wilshire 5000, however, is a broad measure of market participation, along with IWM. Again, August being one of the weaker months of the year. And the NASDAQ, which you can see August and then September for growth stocks, something to keep in mind. As we start off the week with VIX rising, along with the indexes showing a bit of euphoria going into the last week of July. Okay, here is the IBD 50. Now, just as a refresher, remember the S&P Equal Weight Index is on a buy signal. So with these moving higher, we could see a follow through this week. Remember, the number of stocks advancing versus declining percent all gave us a potential follow through for another week. We do have resistance overhead, so when we're trading the IBD 50 this week, we need to keep that in mind. All right, many of these stocks are a bit extended, but there are quite a few like AVTR that is near the 21-day that we're looking for some follow through. That could see this trend perpetuate. Volume, MACD has turned and stochastics is embedded. Also, there is a few stocks that show an asterisk next to them. These I like a little bit better than the rest. Most of them are set up, but I like Pool, HZO, and Fortinet. With Pool showing up on the Stocks on the Move scan from IBD, I really like how this is holding the 50-day for a week. RSI just shot higher with price action moving higher on Friday. We're looking for MACD to turn. Stochastics is set up perfectly. We'll look for this to continue higher to tell us to look for closes in the upper half of the daily range. I'd like to see this push towards 470 on Monday, Tuesday, and potentially test the highs of the session. Upper Keltner band is at 489.68. That would probably be right around the area where I'd expect to see a pullback if we do see strength this week in Pool. HZO is another stock from the IBD on the move scan. This one's pushing higher. The company sells and the company operates 77 retail stores in 21 states selling new and used recreational boats, pleasure craft, and fishing boats. We can see most recent earnings with a nice surprise, 25%, beating by almost a buck, 64% change as people get out and enjoy the outdoors again. Stock breaking higher on above average volume last week post earnings. And we can see that nearly a double from 2020 into 2021, from $3.43 to $6.13 for 2021. Note the growth rate of 44% and stellar ranking with a 98 EPS rating, an SMR rating of A, accumulation distribution of B, and a composite rating of 99. I like to see a timeliness rating of it B or better. Fortinet also shows 52-week highs, continues to push away from the 9 EMA. I'm looking at this name and competitors in the group as the company reports in 4 days, seeing strength in these security stocks with all of the stocks like CrowdStrike with follow-through last week. Zscaler also looks good. Rapid7 also reporting earnings in 10 days. And Zscaler already having reported with 114% improvement, 7 cents versus 15 cents this quarter. Relative strength line climbing. Also looking for strength in the semiconductors. You can see ASML with heavy buying last week. Google with advertising revenue picking up with Snap guidance, and Twitter having an effect on Facebook and Google. The stock rising on above average volume. Pocket pivot taking out more than 3-4 weeks of price action as we push away. I wouldn't buy it up here. I'd be looking for strength, but maybe day trades unless it pulls back. If it does pull back, watch for a pullback to breakout for a potential swing trade without chasing it. Atcore, another stock in the IBD 50, you can see that it had a markdown where price action stayed below the 921 and 50-day. A push back above the 50-day would be a sign that this might be filling out the right side of a cup. And the way that I would trade it, any kind of pullback or breakout, look for a follow-through. AutoNation doing quite well with new cars having an issue with chip shortages. Looking for AutoNation to continue higher as the company posted an earnings beat, 71% surprise, 243% increase quarter over quarter, $1.41 versus $4.83. Reason to think that this one could continue into the end of the year with 103% increase over 2020, with the company operating 315 dealerships offering new and used vehicles for sale, maintenance, with services and financing. Looking for this dip to get bought and then follow through. Bill.com Holdings, this one's from previous watch list. I'd look for a little flag and a continuation. RSI is showing muscle. We got volume showing institutions have been picking up shares. MACD has crossed and stochastics is embedded. Strength in healthcare should see names like CareDx, CDNA continue this path higher, back up to 52-week highs. Volume coming in showing institutions have been picking up shares. Last week, stochastics still rising, and MACD about to cross. CRNC, looking for this to hold the 50-day. A push above the 21-day this week would indicate institutions most likely picking up shares. Looking for a MACD cross and stochastics from oversold to start pointing higher as price action consolidates at the 50-day. Cleveland Cliffs looking for a follow-through as many of the steel stocks look really strong. We noted TX several weeks ago when we wrote about it. The strength in this steel stock has been remarkable, breaking higher while we wait for U.S. Steel to report this week. And for those stocks to continue higher, we can see TX just keeps going. And institutions just keep buying. Cloudflare, I noted many of you were trading this last week. Nice follow through on the week. Tested a 21-day RSI showing muscle, indicating strength of trend. Volume came in last week showing institutions have been picking up shares. I wouldn't chase it up here. Look for a little flag perhaps and then a follow through. Cry cut, potentially a break higher this week. CrowdStrike, another security name, showing institutions picking up shares. MACD's turning, stochastics rising, RSI above 50, showing strength of trend. Look for this breakout, maybe a little flag if we are lucky enough for an entry on CrowdStrike and a follow-through. Decker's Outdoor, we got Dick's also moving higher. Sportsman's Warehouse breaking higher as well. Looking for a follow-through in a lot of these names, as both retail and outdoor activities picking up. Looking for a lot of these stocks to continue higher. DocuSign, if there is any kind of pickup in the Delta variant and there's more concern in the markets, expect this to keep getting bought up. Above average volume, showing institutions have been picking up shares. MACD has crossed again, and stochastics embedded. I'd wait for a little flag, perhaps a move back to the 90 MA for an ultimate entry. And a stock that appears to be headed for much higher levels. Dropbox also need places to put all of these files where everyone is sharing information with each other. Looking for Dropbox to continue higher as well. With the company reporting in 11 trading days, the last few reports were beats. Looking for more of this kind of activity. Then look for the stock to break higher going into earnings. In phase, looking for this to break out as well. Looking for strength in the solar stocks that we saw last week to continue. Evercore reporting in the short term, looking for this to follow through. Asset managers, mergers and acquisitions. Looking for strength in the other companies in the group as well. Facebook with, I believe, the 380 calls trading for this week. Pretty heavy last Friday. Looking for a follow through into earnings this week, with Facebook reporting on Wednesday after the close, and Google after the close on Tuesday. Google will probably give us a good idea of what we can expect with Facebook, having already received reports from Snap and Twitter with good guidance. Fiverr also looks good as a candidate for follow-through this week. At the 21-day, close to the value area, looking for a continuation. RSI is rising, volume picking up, MACD almost crossing, and stochastics rising as well. Floor and Decor, home improvement in Home Depot and Lowe's being noted last week. Some of you are trading those. Floor and Decor, a lot of these names from this group continue higher. Home improvement. Generac, generators along with Enphase, a lot of the renewable energy names look strong. GLBE, an Israeli firm that offers e-commerce solutions. Looking for a follow-through. This is about to break out. Looking at the volume, MACD crossing on this IPO, stochastics rising. Look for confirmation. If it does break out, take the depth of the current range and use that as your measure move of about 10 points, so 74, 75 perhaps in the short term. HubSpot, looking for a follow-through. InMode is trending, looking for a follow-through. Above average volume, showing institutions have been picking up shares. Just check earnings. Innovative Properties operates, buys, and leases back climate control warehouses to the cannabis industry group. Looking for a follow-through. Looks like with Schumer talking nonstop about the legalization of cannabis in the Senate, that'll probably get passed in the short term. Look for this to trend higher, as the company is most likely writing leases with cannabis companies as we speak. JCOM looking for a follow-through and a breakout. Jabil back above the 50-day, looking for a continuation. Volume increasing. MACD and stochastics are bullish. Moderna, no reason to think that this isn't going to be headed for $500 per share by the end of the year, the way it's trading. Don't chase it up here. If you're in it already like Frano, just stick with it and trim as it gets a bit overbought and extended, or maybe trading IBB, which has about 8% weighting in this particular stock. Looking for 52-week highs up there, the 170s in the short term. Volume increasing, showing institutions have been picking up shares. Nvidia looking for strength in the semiconductor group, with the company reporting in 24 days. Note it's beat earnings over the last 6 quarters, anticipating that it'll repeat that this quarter. Pinterest looking for a follow-through. I wouldn't chase it if you're not already in it from Monday of last week, but we're looking for a little flag continuation, maybe a day trade or two, or maybe add to positions if this continues higher. With company reporting earnings in 4 trading days, I would exit prior to earnings. Roku, super strong last week. Looking for a flag or continuation or a little pullback and consolidation. We're at highs, big cup and handle pattern. The depth of the cup is the measured move. So if this starts breaking out, you've got the handle. Look for the continuation. Shopify reports on Wednesday. Looks like they're front running the earnings. Volume showing institutional activity. I wouldn't hold it into earnings. I'd sell into strength. And Snap holding up very well given its earnings and guidance. Looking for any kind of weakness for potential entry. I do like this one on the long side. Eventually giving us a better entry. Right now I don't want to chase it up here post earnings. Sprout Social looking for a follow through, breaking higher with the company reporting in 9 trading days. Square following through on a lot of activity last week with earnings and 11 trading days. Looking for this weekly range to break to the upside and looking for strength to persist in a lot of these network security names like Zscaler, which reports in September. Looking for this cup and handle breakout. Depth of pattern again is your measured move, so looking at least 50 to 70 points. Added to this, maybe 300 is where it's headed in the short term. Okay, traders, that's going to do it for me. This is Cousin Vinny coming to you from theclosingprint.com with your weekend video newsletter. Make sure you check out the rest of these stocks that are listed in the relative strength, new highs, and on the move stocks. Stocks from the scan and stocks that crossed over 9 and 50. Looking for a follow through this week. I'll send out a watch list later tonight around 11, 11:30, maybe 12 o'clock midnight on the East Coast, 9 o'clock on the West Coast, so be sure to look for that in your inbox. Have a great evening. Take care. Enjoy what's left to the rest of your Sunday. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.